The October 17th, 2024 hearing for the Planning and Land Development Regulation Commission is now called to order. And if I could have you silence any audible devices that you may have. And if you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. And Ms. Tucker, could I please have a roll call?
Hi, good morning, members. Member Craig?
Here.
Member Shelley?
Here.
Member Costa?
Here.
Member Sixma?
Here.
Chair Mills?
Here.
And our county sheriff representative is currently vacant. And Member Patterson will be late.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tucker. And we do not have any minutes to speak of this morning. And so we'll move right into it. And if anyone would like to speak for or against any of the cases being heard today, if you would please fill out a form at the back of the dais here and hand it to Ms. Tucker to my immediate left. We will be limiting you to a 3-minute time limit. And after the comments have been heard, I will give the applicant an opportunity to address any concerns the speakers have and answer any questions the commissioners may have. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Soria for legal comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for members of the public and for applicants that decisions by this body on special exception cases and cases which rezone real property from one classification to another pursuant to the zoning ordinance are recommendations only to the county council and do not constitute a final hearing. So new evidence may be introduced at the county council public hearing. However, decisions on variances made by this body constitute a final action, subject to an appeal to the county council. And what this means is that no new evidence may be presented at the time of the county council public hearing on the appeal. An aggrieved party that appeals such a decision is confined to the record made before this body. Hearings by this body on rezonings, special exceptions, and variances are quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that this body is acting more like a court and must take into account all oral, written, or demonstrative evidence presented. Their decisions on these cases must be based on competent substantial evidence in the record, and competent substantial evidence has been defined as that evidence a reasonable mind would accept to support a conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Soria. And while we're on legal comments, I would like to ask the commission to disclose for the record any ex parte communications that have occurred before or during the public hearing at which a vote is to be taken on any quasi-judicial matter. And I'll start with my immediate right with Ms. Craig.
None. None.
None. None.
And I have none. Okay. We do have some items to be continued this morning. Ms. Smith, could I please get a comment on V24076?
Yes, sir. First, however, we did have one of your commission members request that ordinance 2416, which is case 24005, be moved to the end of the agenda to be heard last.
Okay, and that's on the ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it's currently the second item, so you'll just need to take a vote on whether that's all right to do that.
And we will need to take a vote, correct?
We need to take a vote, right?
You've got control of the agenda, so you can just move it whenever
Okay.
you want.
All right, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move that
Yeah.
old business item O24005 to the end of the agenda.
And then we have variance 24075 will need to be continued because the county did not do the correct due public notice. So that will be, we're asking that to be heard at the next meeting, which is November 19th. And then V24076 did not meet due public notice. V24078 did not meet due public notice. And V24079 did not meet due public notice. So we're asking all four of these items to be continued until the November 19th meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith. I'll entertain a motion for all four because of the public notices and the address correction for 7-5.
What is the date of November meeting, please?
November 19th.
It's actually November 21st.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
All right.
This is why we have Kelly here.
Well, yeah, okay.
I'll make a
that's-
motion, Mr. Chair, that we continue cases V-24-075, V-24-076, V-24-078, and V-24-079 until the 11/21, November 21st PLDRC meeting.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to continue V-24-076, V-24-075, V-24-078, V-24-079 to our next meeting of November 21st, 2024. From Mr. Costa and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion?
Nope.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now, for you folks that are, if anyone is in here for any of those cases, they will not be heard today. And so we are continuing those to the 21st of November. So I just don't want you to wait and then find out it's not gonna be heard. Okay, so the other case, we do have unfinished old business here for V-24-068. Ms. Shelley, can I get you to read that into the record?
Yes, sir. Case,
Oh, you're good.
yes, sir. Thank you. Case number V-24-068. Oh, I think I do need that.
No, not 6-8, 7-8.
7-8?
Yeah, but 068, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I read. Okay.
We're not continuing that.
No, I know.
Okay.
I'm just looking for the sheet that I normally have that tells me in shorter terms what it's about instead of reading the full description, but I'll be glad to read the full. Application of Travis Barr, agent for the owner, requesting a variance to the minimum yard requirements of prime agriculture A1 zoned property. Property is located at 701 Raisley Road, New Smyrna Beach, parcel number 820-100-06-0050.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Ms. Smith, this one is yours.
Yes, sir. This case was continued from the September PLDRC hearing. The applicant is proposing to build a single-family residence near New Smyrna Beach. It's a 2.5-acre vested lot. It's got a triangular shape with 2 front yards and 1 side yard. It is zoned A1, and it's subject to the larger A1 setbacks of 100 feet in the front yard and 50 feet in the side yard. Wetlands do cover the eastern portion of the site, and it's in the natural resource management area, which is subject to 50-foot wide wetland buffers. The applicant is requesting the variance to reduce the front yard from 100 feet to 30 feet to avoid those wetlands and their buffers. The variance meets 3 of the 5 criteria for approval, and we do recommend approval with the one condition that it's in the location shown on the variance site plan. We did have 1 letter of opposition, and we did have 1 gentleman who came to the last meeting who wanted to speak in opposition, and we are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Could I get your name and address for the record, sir?
My name is JJ Rupp. I am at 1411 South Woodland Boulevard here in DeLand, and I'm here on behalf of TD Bar Construction.
Okay. You've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, no, we're just trying to stay out of the wetland buffers and to preserve as much of the wetlands as possible. So we're requesting you guys permission to be able to reduce that front yard setback to be able to do so.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Ms. Craig.
Have you taken a look at this property since the storm?
Yes, I was there the day after the storm, and I was also there on Monday as well. There's no standing water. I have pictures I'm happy to share. It's a very unique property. If you drive by it, it's in flood zone X, which is odd for, a wetland property. It's majority pine trees. It's not like a cypress tree swamp like you would expect to see wetlands. It is dry. I walked the property. I'd be happy to share pictures of that as well. So the building site and everything it's pine trees and more traditional looking, foliage rather than the wetlands.
And what method of construction is planned for this?
It's a single-family home, concrete block. It's a modest house. It's about 1,700 square feet, living area. It's a nice country style. The owner, wants to preserve as much of the front yard buffer as well with the trees. If they could push it back, we would, but without disturbing the wetlands. We're going to try to keep a little bit of the trees and everything in the front as well to kind of
So it's poured in place concrete?
concrete block, correct? Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Costa?
Yeah, we got several letters of opposition. Have you guys had any kind of conversation with the neighbors or the surrounding homes?
No, so a couple of the neighbors, the immediate neighbor, I believe the property is for sale. At least there's a big for sale sign. It's a vacant piece of property. There's a neighbor across the street. I've never spoke with them, but no, I have not talked to any of the immediate neighbors personally.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm surprised it's dry right now. Radley Road there's a lot of water back there.
It's a very interesting lot.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's flood zone X. During the due diligence, of course, we could probably have done a little bit more. But the county shows one little pocket up in the corner that is wet, and they said it was a good buildable lot. We had our non-conforming lot letter. Everything seemed good until we got a couple of the wetland delineation reports, and it showed a little bit different story. So now that's why we're here, to try to incorporate the best we can with what we now know.
Okay. All right, so we do have some public participation forms here, and what I'll do is let them speak, and then I'll let you come back up,
No problem at all.
answer any questions or concerns that they have.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you, guys.
Okay, we're going to start off this morning with Mr. Confidential. It's confidential. All right, I'm not going to ask your name and address for the record, so you had a comment you would like to speak about on this case?
I'm here representing the property owner for PID 8201-000-60040. His name and address is exempt, protected by Florida state statute, as is mine. Well, my name is not, but my address is. My name is Eric Westfall. I didn't know my introduction would eat off the time. Okay, well,
Yeah,
there we go. According to the demonstrable that's up there on the screen, you'll see that the plot map shows that the part of the house is actually in the buffer on the upper corner. I would like to start to say, but this request is avoidable, unnecessary, and more importantly, foreseeable. The due diligence on the current owner would have highlighted the following concerns: so it's A1 agriculture with the associated setbacks. It has 2 front yards, and it's entirely contained within in our MA, which requires a 50-foot buffer. It consists of, by their own analysis, 80% wetlands, and it also contains St. John River Management Water District wetlands. It's a flatwoods depression. In a report that was submitted by Trish Smith, a 17-page report, on page 2, it clearly delineates the property contains NERMA. The forester for the county, Keith Abrahamson, also drafted an interdepartment memorandum to that report, which shows that it has a NERMA 50-foot wetland buffer. However, the applicant submitted his surveys that show a 25-foot buffer. The house, as submitted in this demonstrable here, shows a 25-foot buffer. So if you add the 50-foot buffer required by NERMA, basically 80 to 90% of the house is contained in the wetland buffer. So the request of the variance is defective on its face. It shows the house contained in the only portion of the wetlands it's buildable, but if you add the 50-foot boundary line, again, you'll see 90% of the house is contained actually in the wetland buffer. So that would require the house to be moved further 25 foot further to the west, and if so, then you have a 5-foot setback. If you have a 5-foot setback, then where does the septic tank go? Where does the well go? The county's position is to protect wetlands. I don't have enough time to say all this, but
I'm going to give you 20 more seconds, sir.
okay. That the county's ordinance not only protects the owner of the wetlands, but also other citizens in the county for protection of the wetlands. Inland wetlands provide temporary storage of water during floods. Can contain an acre of wetlands can store and treat 1.5 million gallons of flood water. They also filter sediment, organic matter, chemicals, and they also house half of all North American bird species in the wetlands. There's a whole bunch on this thing. I submitted this report, the homeowner submitted this report. Hopefully you got it for your review. There's a lot contained in it. But there's a lot of the criteria that haven't been met either because of these wetland buffers and the site boundary issues. There was 2 separate boundary issues submitted to the county, one in 2021 by the previous owner of the property, Amanda Rupp LLC. That was completed by Able Surveying Company on December 28th. The plot map submitted with this application was completed October 31st.
We've given you your 20 seconds.
It is considerably different than the one that was shown. There's a lot of issues with
Okay,
this
let's see
application.
if we have any questions for you, sir. Hold on a moment. Any questions for the speaker? All right, thank you, sir. Okay. Kristen Caldwell? Can I get your name and address for the record?
Kristen Caldwell, 640.
If you'll speak into the mic, just pull it down there. There you go.
Kristen Caldwell, 641 Rasley Road.
Uh-huh.
I'm 2 lots to the side. I just am concerned about when you disrupt the wetlands, our properties are already wet. I don't know how he saw that that property isn't wet, because my property is wet. So I'm just concerned with disrupting those wetlands that our properties are going to get more wet when the hurricanes, rains, and things like that.
Okay.
That's all I have to say. I just-
Okay. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thanks.
And then I have I can't see the last name here, so is Tommy. You can give me your name and address for the record, sir.
Okay, it's Tom Donati. The property he's talking about next to it, I already had sold it. You got an opposition letter from the new owner at 645 Rasley Road. I live at 642 Rasley Road and 4020 directly across. My issues are the due diligence. He said he did due diligence. They put in for an application almost 3 years or 2 or 3 years ago, got denied by the board. There's been a lot of violations on the property. They should have pulled them up. The wetlands was cleared before they bought it, and the disparity lines from the previous application to this application, if you overlay them, this one, wetlands just don't shrink. But in this new application, the survey guy shrunk it to put this house on there. Clearly, if you go off a 2021 survey, a lot more of that house is in the wetlands. Wetlands just don't go away. Soil doesn't change. I moved out to the rural area because I don't want to be living on top of people's houses. 30 feet on top of the road when it should be a 100-foot setback. Should have done their homework, should have done their due diligence. They can mitigate the wetlands, they can push it back, they can mitigate it, but obviously they don't want to pay the cost to do so because it won't make it valuable for either the homeowner or for resale value. Me being a builder myself, it's probably going to, I would say, upwards of $100,000 just to clear the wetlands and mitigate it. That's an option for them. It shouldn't become our problem that they didn't do the due diligence, and we should have to accept a house that is 30 feet from the roadway. I didn't move out there 10 years ago for that. It's, in my opinion, it's going to diminish everyone's property value around there. Once again, this is a huge investment for me. I bought 25 acres, subdivided it, sold off 2 properties, built Kristen's house for her, and we have value out there, and I think, in my personal opinion, this is definitely going to diminish all of our property values around us. This will set a precedence for future lots out there where most of it is wetlands. That lot has always been wet. Once again, I would like to see his pictures that don't show any standing water, but it's, you go ahead and walk through there and I guarantee you're gonna sink. The previous violation, they sunk a bobcat in the back there. They had to use my property to get it out. When they bought it, they knew what the setbacks were. Once again, they should done due diligence, shouldn't come here after they buy the property and ask us surrounding property owners to accept a house being put straight on top of the.
Okay, so, I do have a question for you. Is your property have water standing on it at the moment?
Yes, in the back it does. Well, my old property, yes, in the back it does.
Okay. Any questions for the
Along
speaker?
Presley Road.
Okay. Any questions for the speaker? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Do we have any more public participation forms for this case? All right, I'll give the applicant a chance to come back for rebuttal.
So a couple of the points, which I can see their point to it. So directly across the street, I believe, is A2, which is a much smaller setback from the road. I do have a printout here. Subject property, there's 3 different ones. This is the subject property. They all are very visible from the street. They're within 20, 30 feet of the road. I don't know if you guys want to look at this
No,
or
you
not.
have to submit that to Ms. Tucker to my left, and that will become part of the record.
So changing the neighborhood, having the house a little bit closer, I understand, they live in the country, they want to have the space, they want to have the setbacks, but there is, several other homes standing from that corner that you can see that are going to be the same as what we are requesting. I totally agree with disturbing the wetlands and not wanting to have to mitigate or push the water in other directions or have any issues to the surrounding neighbors. That is why we're requesting this, to be able to have the house brought up, to not have to deal with the wetlands and disturbing the wetlands. Because I know we're all having issues with flooding lately, and this is kind of our compromise and why we're asking, to not have to have it completely in the wetlands. Because here, whether the 25 or 50 foot, I think that's for our wetland alteration permit to kind of decide on that. But we're not in the wetlands. We are just in that buffer area is what we're asking for. And I'd be happy to, show the pictures. I guess I should have printed them to bring them, but the property right to the north, it has been, changed a lot over the years. So I did see standing water on that property next door, because the wetlands there has been, kind of turned to pasture land over the last several years. So the water still sits there.
I do apologize. We're having some issues with our hover cam, so I did pass the sheet down to the members, so it'll be there momentarily, and it will be part of the public record.
So you can see the triangular piece, and that one is in view of each of those screenshots.
Okay. One of the gentlemen spoke previously about the wetland buffer line
Correct.
being not in the same area as it was previously. Are you
Correct.
familiar with that?
Yes, so it was not done by the same company. The wetlands, I think, have changed significantly over the last 8 or 9 years in the neighborhood. I can submit that as well. You can see the property to the north has been kind of cleared and changed over time. So that has, I think, changed our property's topography and kind of wetlands, because if you look at the county's printout, it shows a very small area in the back corner is what we looked at when purchasing the property, and now it has changed significantly because there's been some fill added and some wetlands cleared and some different things going on to the property to the north, which I think is kind of changing and evolving the property directly next to it, which is ours.
Okay.
So, if you like,
The
I
other
can
thing too is if you're gonna build this home here, what is your expected elevation on, or how much fill do you think you're gonna be bringing in?
So I don't believe it's going to be a ton of fill if you walk it and look at the topography map, which I can probably submit that as well. It's not like a big depression, low-lying area. The property actually next door, I believe, is going to be lower on the topography map than where we are. So I think they do have currently standing water even today on that property there. Is there a way to submit the pictures that I did take? Because I know that was brought up.
Unfortunately, I don't, unless you don't have it printed, no.
Yeah, okay, not a
Yeah.
problem at all.
Okay.
But I do have these ones printed, just showing the adjoining property and how the wetlands kind of have.
You have to give that to Miss Kelly to my left. Mr. Soria, is there a way for him to submit that into the record after those pictures? So,
Well, it's, if you haven't seen them, you can't consider them, so there's no
yeah,
point.
I don't mind passing my phone
he can-
down the row.
I don't know if you could, the doc cam isn't working, so it's, okay.
Okay.
I mean, you can continue this to later on in today, if you can email it, you can, but right now, if you haven't seen it, there's no point in submitting, evidence that you,
So you can
What are you
see where
considering?
the silt
Yeah.
fence and the home site is, and there's majority pine trees and everything
Okay.
there.
all right, sir.
Yeah.
All right, we can, for the folks that are here and for you too, you don't want to continue it, do you? Does anyone on the commission want to continue this?
No.
No, okay. All right. Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion. We'll see where it goes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Did you have a question for me?
No, I do for staff.
Okay. No, sir.
My question is for staff. So I'm just listening to both sides of the story here, and I know from survey to survey, you're always going to have some kind of a change. Two different companies, you're going to have two different opinions of location. Looking at your report, do you see anything here that's out of the ordinary? Anything that you would change other than your recommendation to approve at this point?
Based on what we have in our system, when we get variances in, we send them out to all the different departments. Our environmental group did review it, and I did just go pull the files from the review of the single-family residence, and there is a pending wetland permit in there.
Okay.
Our policy is avoidance and minimization. They are clearly trying to avoid the wetlands and minimize the impacts to the wetlands, which is consistent with our code.
So if EP is okay with this, then, which is probably the strongest
Right now,
staff
everybody's
in this,
waiting.
group- in this building.
Correct. Right now, they're waiting to see if the variance is issued.
All right, perfect, thank you.
My question is for staff also. The zoning on the property across from that, that's not A1, correct? It's A2 there, that A2 zoning? Yeah, A2 on the top two.
There's A2 to the north, A2 to the east, and the larger lots to the left are the A1.
Got it. Okay. All right, that answers my questions. Any other questions for staff? Okay, I'm gonna open this up for commission discussion, and, whichever way this goes, what you need to understand is there's always an appeal process to, the county council. Mr. Soria, do you want to explain that, the appeal process, before we continue with this?
yes, so, any person who is, aggrieved by the decision of this, board can appeal, I think within 10 days of the rendition letter to the county council. If you appeal, no new evidence can be presented. You are just solely discussing the evidence presented at this hearing. So that's, if it gets appealed, that those are, you can't bring up new things that were not brought up at this hearing. You can argue and discuss, the weight of what was previously in the report or what was previously discussed, but when it comes to the appeal hearing, all new types of evidence will be thrown out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soria.
And I think there's a form online.
Right. And this variance is just pertaining to the setback to the front yard, is that correct? It's
That
not
is
to the
correct.
wetlands, it's just It's not it's not a wetlands
That's correct.
variance.
It's a
Okay, we
setback.
can't give a wetlands variance anyway, can we? Mr. Soria?
No, sir.
No, environmental is the one that determines avoidance and minimization.
Okay,
So if they're, even if this board does not grant a variance, or even if it does, environmental still has that review capacity to determine, okay, is this development, one, avoiding wetland impacts? And if it can't, is it minimizing the wetland impacts? And if it doesn't, we would not issue, or environmental would not issue a development permit.
okay. All right, so basically, we are just looking at the variance for the front yard setback. That's not our
That's it.
department for the wetlands, so, and I'm gonna stay consistent with everything I previously said on these A1 properties for the setbacks like this, and I'm okay with it.
I make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve variance request case number V-24-068 with the one staff recommended condition.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor for Mr. Costa to approve variance V-24-068 with the one staff recommended condition, and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, we got a 3-2,
Mr. Chair.
and it needs 4?
Yes, you need a minimum of 4. So right now, that motion fails.
Mhm.
So your options are, you can ask if there are any additional conditions, any amendments to the variance request, take up another motion, or someone can make a motion to deny, or it'll just fail for the lack of getting a minimum 4.
Okay, let me ask you this. If it goes through, obviously it's a technical denial, correct?
Yes.
And if it goes as a technical denial, what is the time frame for them to reapply?
1 year,
So they would have to wait 1 year for this technical denial,
unless
correct?
it's appealed to county council.
Okay. Okay. And the only reason I'm saying this is because we have 5 people here, and we do not have a full commission here, which is usually 7, but we only have 6 appointed. Can I, well, he hasn't heard the evidence. I was going to continue it to the end of the meeting, but I can't do that because he hasn't heard the evidence.
Just a clarification to that 1-year rule.
Yes.
That would be specifically for this variance. They could choose to come in for a rezoning, which would then change the setbacks to 50 feet in the front, 25 feet on the side. And if you, Kelly, if you can put the zoning map back up there, you'll see there are A1 properties, or A1 and 2A properties surrounding them. So that may be another remedy for them as well.
Okay. Okay, let me put it this way. Is there any conditions that the 2 members that said no would consider for this variance? Any other conditions?
No.
Okay, all right, all right. Well, it goes through as a technical denial, and unfortunately, your variance has been denied. As Ms. Smith stated just then, you can apply for a zoning.
One thing about the zoning, I think the minimum size of A2 is 5 acres. This is a 2.5 acre property. So that's something that it may come back, in a different manner. The applicant may appeal the decision to county council within 10 days of the rendition letter.
Okay. That's your option there. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next case. Ms. Shelley, could I get, okay, that's it for the old business until the ordinance comes up at the end of the meeting here. So what we'll do is we'll move right into our new business. Ms. Shelley, could I get the first case, please?
Yes. I just Case number V-24-050, the application of Angelo and Ursula Moschia, owners requesting variances to the minimum yard requirements and maximum fence height on urban mobile home MH5 and resource corridor RC zoned property. Property is located at 250 Bassett Bay Road, Oak Hill.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. And this, Ms. Ray.
Good morning. The applicants are seeking variances for a proposed detached garage and a 6-foot fence. Variance 1 is to reduce the front yard from 20 feet to 4 feet for a proposed proposed detached garage. Variance 2 is to increase fence height from 4 feet to 6 feet in the south front yard. Variance 3 is to increase the fence height from 4 feet to 6 feet in the west front yard. Variance 4 is to increase the fence height from 3 feet to 6 feet in the north waterfront yard. And variance 5 is to increase the fence height from 3 feet to 6 feet in the east waterfront yard. The property abuts the Indian River to the north and east, creating 2 waterfront yards. The property is also north of Bissett Bay Road and east of a right-of-way easement, creating 2 front yards. There is a drive that bisects the property, curving from the southern boundary line to the adjacent parcel to the west. The detached garage is proposed to be located to the west of the curve of the drive aisle and the southern boundary line. Staff's recommendation for variance 1 is for approval as it meets 5 of the 5 criteria, and variances 2 through 5 are also recommended for approval as it meets 3 of the 5 criteria. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Could you come forward, sir? And could I get your name and address for the record?
My name is Angelo Mocha, and I live at 250 Bissett Bay Road, Oak Hill, Florida.
Thank you, sir. You've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
No.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? All right, sir. Do we have any public participation forms? Okay. We're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion or a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion. Case V-24-050, motion to grant variances 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with the staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Okay, and how many conditions?
I don't think there are any, actually. Just says approve.
There is none?
No.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa to approve variance V-24-050. Variances 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case,
Could I see
please?
your, excuse me, could I see your next one, please? Just that one, thank you. So I'm reading these like they normally were in. Case number V-24-074, variances to the minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R5 zoned property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Ms. Smith, this one's yours.
It's mine.
Okay.
So the applicant is seeking variances for a proposed swimming pool. Variance 1 is to allow the proposed swimming pool to be located within the front yard. Variance 2 is to reduce the north front yard from 25 feet to 9 feet for the pool. And variance 3 is to reduce the north front yard from 25 feet to 6 feet for the proposed screen enclosure. The property is a double frontage lot with Sunrise Cove Circle to the north and Roberta Road to the south, creating the subject property with 2 front yards and 2 side yards. The pool is proposed to be located behind the residence within the area that acts as the applicant's rear yard. If the property was not a double frontage lot, variances would not be needed, as within rear yard, pools can be 8 feet from the rear property line and screen enclosures could be 5 feet from the rear property line. Staff's recommendation is to approve variances 1 through 3, subject to one condition. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. And my sheet said Ms. Smith, by the way. I didn't do that on purpose.
Yeah, apologies, it was a typo error on my end.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Do you want to come forward, sir? Could I get your name and address for the record, sir?
Yeah. Ahmet Murat Özgul, 167 Roberto Road, Ormond Beach, Florida.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything that you would like to add to that?
No, we just want to build a swimming pool. We are, our families are in Europe, and when they visit the niece, nephews, we want to have a pool for them to enjoy their time.
Okay, sir. Any questions for the applicant? All right, do we have, oh, Ms. Craig?
So you say that it's just basically for people to come visit and stay there?
Yeah, for our family, yes, for us too, because we work from
So-
home and we want like the nice pool view, especially during the evenings with the.
So it would be vacant most of the time?
We are planning to stay at least half of the year in Ormond Beach. I have businesses in Georgia, but I have business in here too. And we are working from home, so we have that flexibility. So if we can like build a pool, if we can make the house like more enjoyable for ourselves, we probably spend most of our times in Florida because we like the weather and we like Florida better.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any public participation forms? Okay. We're going to close the floor for, you can have a seat now, sir. We're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion or a motion.
I'm ready.
Go ahead, Mr.
I'll make a motion to approve variance requests 1 through 3 on case V-24-074 with the one staff recommended condition.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor for Mr. Costa to approve variances 1, 2, and 3 for variance V-24-074 with the one staff condition, and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Did I see your next page? Just so I can read. Yes, thank you. Case number V-24-082, variance to dock requirements on urban mobile home, MH5 zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Mr. Shams, this one's yours.
Hi, good morning. Before I begin, just wanted to state the applicant wanted to attend, but is not present due to significant hurricane damage. But he
Can
would
you say
like-
that? Can you repeat that? I didn't hear the last part.
The applicant is not here today due to significant hurricane damage to his home, so he would like the variance to proceed. We received 2 letters of opposition, which have been provided to you. And I'd like to make one correction on the first page. The variance is to the east side yard, not the north. The property is a waterfront yard on a canal with an existing dock. The applicant applied for a building permit in April 2024 for a new boathouse and boat lift to expand their dock area and store their new boat. The permit was issued in July 2024, and the property owner began construction on the dock's pilings and supports. A code enforcement complaint was submitted by a neighbor shortly after. After further review by the zoning official in September of this year, the permit was found to be issued in error, as the dock does not meet the side requirement of 15 feet. The property itself is 50 feet wide, and the proposed dock would be built in line with the existing dock, as you can see on the screen, which is it's approximately 16 feet on the western side and 11.2 feet on the eastern side. So the variance is necessary for him to finish his dock construction, and they're seeking the variance to the eastern side yard. Overall, staff recommends approval as the variance meets 5 of 5 criteria, and we do not recommend any conditions. I'm available for comment or question.
Just want to clarify your first comment. So on page 1, where it says reduce the north side yard, that actually is the east side yard?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shams. Any question for staff?
And
Okay. All right, do we do have a public participation form here? Mr. John Wilson? like to comment on this case, sir?
Yes, my name's John Wilson. I own 174 Charles Street, which is to the east of the property, and I'm also the president of the HOA. The only comment is, they say there were no complaints. As soon as it started being constructed, it's the first time anyone can see what's being constructed. You used to be able to pull the permits up online until the last year. We no longer can do that. You no longer have to post them on site, so until it's actually started construction, the neighbors don't know what's going on. The complaints with it is now I only have 11 feet on that side. I can't get my boat in and out properly anymore. Plus, it's also extended out into the canal past guidelines. The guidelines are very strict. They're 25% of the waterway. He is now going to be 34% of the waterway. This variance is strictly to the east, which should be 15 feet. It doesn't discuss the fact he's too far out into the canal. They're both guidelines he doesn't follow. We have over 250 waterfront homes in our community. Now you're changing the rule for every home. We've over 30% don't have boathouses currently, but over 70% too that have always followed the guidelines. Now we're starting wars between neighbors just because the staff made a mistake. The engineer should have known better. The people who put in the poles should have known the proper rules, and so should a staff. I've personally gone through this process, and it's not a fun process to go through, so I don't know how it got accepted. But there are complaints from neighbors. The HOA's been getting calls on it. Everyone to his west will have problems navigating the canal because he's made it another 6 feet thinner than he's allowed to by code. The wood dock you're talking about was never permitted, was unconforming when it was built, so I don't know how we're allowed to go past that. When you build a boathouse, they measure from the water, which you can see on his survey that's included in the application. The current dock sticks 6 feet past the water line, so he should have had to remove that prior to the boathouse being constructed. And other neighbors have had to, so I don't see why a hardship that's been self-induced on this should be my hardship and every other neighbor's going forward because there was a mistake. And originally, I complained the days the poles went into the neighbor, and he said he would remove the 2 poles to my side and move them in code. Instead, he applied for a variance. No one notified me, and I didn't know until I saw the variance letter come out. So there were complaints. I didn't complain to the county because I assumed he was going to fix it. And as soon as I got the variance letter, I did send notification in that I had a complaint about it. I know the neighbors across the canal have complained, and several up the canal. I included that I emailed in the federal law that shows it's not to code. The county knows it's not to code, so I don't see how it can be approved.
Okay, sir.
All
Any
right.
questions for the speaker? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other public participation forum for this? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or a motion.
Actually, I'd like to hear from staff on that
Okay.
regarding the federal regulations that they were just talking about. I personally am not familiar with it, so.
We review for county code. We are not allowed to hold up permits for other agencies. If they are required to get other agency permits, then they'll need to do that as well. So
Is
if they're
that-
in violation of a federal rule, that would be the federal folks that they work with.
Okay, and is that a possibility in this particular case?
I don't know the federal rules.
Okay.
We review for county
All right.
code.
Okay.
Okay. No, we've closed the floor for public participation.
Federal law in though that I was told would be.
No,
Might be.
okay. Go ahead, Ms. Craig.
How does it stand as far as local regulations, county or in this case, versus HOA regulations? Who typically gets the bigger voice?
We do not review or enforce HOA regulations. We don't have the authority to do that. If there is, the HOA usually is typically set up as there's an architectural review committee, and HOAs have independent statutory authority to fine structures that don't conform to their regulations. But that's not something the county reviews or enforces. We are only enforcing the county codes, which is, the setbacks and the overall size of the proposed dock. So if there's HOAs have that independent authority to enforce their own rules and regulations. The county doesn't step in and enforce it for them. We don't have the right or authority to do that. So there's not one over the other. They're two separate tracks and two separate enforcement mechanisms. So you could be in violation of both. You can be in violation of one or the other, but then they both operate independently.
I have another question.
Yeah, Mr. Costa?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something in my own head here. This variance is strictly for a setback, period. Nothing to do with a dock, nothing to do with a boat lift, just a setback. Is there a permit in play right now for the building of this dock that we see in the pictures that is in different stages of development?
Yes.
Yes, a permit was, I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh, go ahead.
A permit was issued in error. Unfortunately, when the zoning tech reviewed it, she did not catch that that pole was not 15 feet. It was at 11 feet.
Mm-hmm.
He went ahead, got his permit issued, started putting his posts in, and then a call came in, and we went and re-reviewed the permit and saw that it did not meet the zoning code. The applicant was notified immediately to stop work. He did that, and his remedy is to come in and ask for a variance.
For a variance, all right. So there is a permit for the dock itself. And so my question is, that dock is basically under the guise of the county, and being on a waterway, is it also looked at by state or federal? Or strictly the county?
It could be, depending on who owns
The
bottom,
right-of-way.
and I don't know
The
that.
waterway,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so this is strictly for a setback, nothing more?
Correct.
Thank you.
I've got a question also. It says existing wooden dock. Is that one that was previously there? Or is there now?
That's there now, and they're adding to it with the boathouse.
Got it. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Any commission discussion? Let's talk about it. What's your feelings, guys?
Well, this is similar to one of the others we had. This is just nothing more than a setback. I mean, the permit for the dock itself is the one that's going to dictate whether or not they can build this dock where it's at, where it sits. And again, not knowing this waterway, I don't know if it's controlled by a state or federal, which typically requires yet another set of eyes on it before they can go forward. So I'm fuzzy, other than the fact that this is about a variance for a setback for a dock or a boathouse or a deck that exists, correct? And we're adding a boat lift to, or a existing dock to it, rebuilding it, I guess? Or am I missing something here?
I can clarify.
Yes.
So the existing wooden dock is currently there.
Okay.
And they're building the new boathouse and lift in line with that existing dock. So
All
it
right.
won't protrude further out. It's just going to be a straight line through. So we'll have the same setbacks or same sides.
So the new boathouse with a lift will not protrude further out than the existing deck?
That's correct.
So we're putting it right on top of the existing wooden deck? Roughly.
Further out. So it'll come further south.
Hence the variance.
Yes, the variance is for the east side.
Okay, I'm looking at this picture here. The variance is for the east side.
Mm-hmm.
We're not really looking at the variance for going further down to the south.
No,
It's just for the east side.
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what the confusion is. We're not talking about it
We're not
protruding in the
talking
water.
about
We're not going out in the
Going-
waterway
No,
any
we're only
deeper.
talking about the side
We're
of the
talking about
property.
the waterways. We're talking about the side
Yep.
property line.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. So pretty much we don't, it's not in our purview
Mm-mm.
to decide how far that
No.
dock goes out. In
No.
other words, if it was to come in further, he could go further out unless somebody said he couldn't.
Correct.
Authority.
We're just
Okay.
looking at a side setback.
Got it. Everybody clear on that?
Mm-hmm.
Clear now.
Okay, clear as mud, right? Okay. Okay, anybody want to discuss it any further?
Took a while to get there. I'll make a motion when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead and make a motion. Mr.
I
Clerk.
make a motion to approve variance request on case number V-24-082 with no staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor for Mr. Costa to approve variance V 24082, and a second for Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, I've got a motion, 4-2, with Miss Shelley and Miss Craig in dissent. Okay. Miss Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir.
Before we move on to the next case, just for the record show, I do want to let everybody know Member Patterson is here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. He's present.
Case number Z-24-015, rezoning from the General Office B9 zoning classification to the Urban Single-Family Residential R4 zoning classification.
Thank you, Miss Shelley.
Could we read the two together since they're tied?
Be glad to. but-
24-007?
Thank you.
Are they the same thing?
Case number V-24-077, variances to the minimum yard requirements, accessory structure requirements, and maximum fence height requirements on General Office B9 zoned property. Thank you.
Mr. Shams, this one's yours.
Hi, good morning again. So we'll start with the rezoning. So the property is currently developed with a single-family home and a screen enclosed concrete patio. The home was built in 1956. The applicant has indicated the home and the structure will be completely removed, and they're proposing a new home, an in-ground swimming pool, and a proposed accessory structure along with that. So the site is located at the corner of A1A, which is Ocean Shore Boulevard, and Ocean Breeze Circle. The surrounding lands are a mixture of office uses, single-family residential uses, and multifamily. The existing home is non-conforming. It has been in place since '56. The applicant is proposing to rezone because a single-family residence is not a permitted use under B9. And since the property is approximately 9,100 square feet, it does not meet the minimum lot requirement of 20,000 square feet for B9. We also, for every rezoning, we look at comprehensive plan consistency, and the future land use of this site is urban high intensity, and R4 zoning is typically not compatible, but we did look at further review of our future land use element and found this site qualifies for the exception of minimum density requirement. There's 6 requirements that need to be met, and we found they met all 6. This would allow a residential density less than the minimum 8 units per acre. And since the site is rezoning to retain the existing use of one single-family residence, there are no anticipated impacts of government services. The site has on-site utilities, and there's no additional school concurrency requirements or transportation impacts. And the R4 rezoning makes the site conform to our zoning ordinance. So overall, staff did recommend approval. Recommends forward to the county council for final action of approval. And if you'd like, I can continue on with the variance.
Yes, please.
Okay. So they are requesting 6 variances for their proposed structures. And the structures include a 2,500 square foot home, a 500 square foot accessory structure, and a 533 square foot in-ground pool. So when we reviewed the site, we noticed it has 3 points of ingress and egress, 2 to Ocean Breeze Circle and 1 to State Road A1A. The drive aisle on the east side of the property that connects A1A to Ocean Breeze Circle, they are proposing for that to remain, but the driveway to the west, they are proposing to replace. So that will be a new driveway. So in addition to the proposed structure, the applicant is also proposing to enclose the property with a combination of fencing and walls. So on the east front yard, there is a 6-foot tall fence. On the south front yard, it's a combination of a 6-foot fence and a 6-foot masonry wall. And on the west front yard, they're requesting a 6-foot masonry wall. So variances 1 and 2 are for the yard requirements. They're proposing to reduce the front yard on the south from 25 feet to 12.8 feet. And on the north side yard, they're proposing to reduce it from 8 feet to 5 feet. And this would be consistent with the structure that's currently there. Can you go back, Kelly? Sorry. Variance 3 is to allow the accessory structures to be located within the front yard. And then variances 4, 5, and 6 correspond to the fences. So we also had our traffic engineer review this application, and he did recommend that the access point onto State Road A1A be closed for safety reasons. So we've included that as a condition. So overall, staff recommends, next slide, please, Kelly. Denial for variances 1, 2, 4, and 5, and recommend approval on variances 3 and 6. And our one staff condition is to close the eastern property access point to A1A.
Thank you, Mr. Shams. Is there an existing fence there on variance 4 now?
No, sir.
There's not. And that's on A1A, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just one question, just to clarify, it's obvious, but I just want to clarify, this house does in fact have 3 front yards.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Storch,
Good morning. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming today.
name and address for the
dealing-
record, sir.
Dealing with hurricanes. Thank you. It was not easy to get out of my house because it's surrounded by a lake, but we did. So the bottom line in this case.
Mr. Storch, could I get your name and address?
I'm
for the
sorry.
record?
Glenn Storch, 420 South Nova Road, Daytona Beach, Florida is the name of is the address of the office. Okay. All right, and I represent the applicant in this case. They're a wonderful couple. They were very happy to buy what they thought was going to be a house they could then build their dream house on, next to family. They're the family of the couple live next door to this. It's perfect for them. So when they bought this, they thought it was a house. They thought it was a residential structure. And because it had been used as a residential structure for years. We went through this. We thought we could deal with this. We thought we could take this as a non-conforming use and build up using the exact same footprints as the non-conforming use. As it turns out, a very diligent staff member found that years ago, literally decades ago, this was used in fact for a commercial use, for an office, and therefore we could not use it as a non-conforming structure. We had to come in and redo everything. So now we're here to make this part of the neighborhood, to make this a neighborhood residential structure. And to do that, you have to have variances because you can't build a mobile home size house on this site, which is what you would have if you didn't have the variances that allowed for the use of the existing footprint. The concept was to look at this as the existing structure. One of the things that staff did not look at because of the fact they said this is going to be torn down, and I understand that, is the fact that the existing structure is a basis for a variance as well. That is a basis, because if I kept those walls, those 2 walls, the north wall and the south wall, and just went up from those walls, I wouldn't have to have a variance. But at the same time, that's stupid, because I couldn't build a strong house using those old walls. Is that correct? Well, I don't know about the strong house. But yes, so I mean, this is on the ocean. you need to basically, when you build this, you need to rebuild it so it meets current code and current criteria. And I don't want to use those same walls to go up. So in this particular case, what we're saying is we're keeping the footprint. We're, as far as the north side and the south side, we're just building different walls, better walls, stronger walls to protect the neighborhood and to protect the applicants in this case. So those are that's the key issue as far as the variance. You know, the size of the size of the setbacks to the north, which, by the way, is the side that is adjoining the family, and the side to the south, which is the side road. Those are the key issues. The pool apparently has no issue whatsoever. You have a recommendation for approval of that. The second issue is the wall. I think you can see what the status of this house looks like now. We're showing it on the screen. It needs to be replaced. It needs to be repaired. There was also some storm damage as a result of the hurricane. This is one of the reasons why we need to rebuild this house at this point. So this is the wall, by the way, that you're showing that I believe is directly adjacent to the family member. So that's a 6-foot wall already. All we're trying to do is to match the 6-foot wall all around and provide for some privacy and security, both for the pool and for the family. I should point out, and I'll go ahead and provide this as evidence, there's already been one sheriff's report regarding a break-in to the site. They are worried about the site. They're worried about the privacy. It's right on A1A. So this is something that we wanted to make sure that we did have, and the 6-foot wall would provide us that privacy. And so those are the two issues, really. The two issues are, can we build this to the current setback, to the current footprint, and can we deal with this? As to the safety issue, I understand. If that is the issue, we can certainly talk about that. We'd obviously love to have the A1A access as well, but if we don't, if that's the case, if that's the biggest issue, then we can resolve that. But the other part, we obviously have to have the appropriate setbacks in order to build a home, and we really need the appropriate sized wall that matches all the way around to provide the safety and privacy necessary. And that's really it. I mean, we're trying to do something good for the neighborhood. This family has been part of the neighborhood for literally years and years. How many years? Decades? 25 years. So this is important to them. This is important for the neighborhood. This is important to my clients. If I can provide any additional conditions that are appropriate, let me know. But this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve the neighborhood. This doesn't need to be an office or anything else that is currently allowed under that B9 designation. This needs to be a home and part of the neighborhood. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Costa. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Costa.
Go ahead.
Ms. Craig, go ahead.
You brought up the issue of there being a break-in there. Was the house occupied at the time of a break-in?
I don't think so. It wasn't, no. So that's part of the problem. You're right. I mean, I'm sure the fact it was sitting there was one of the issues as far as why there was a break-in, but it does create concerns for the family, as you can imagine. And so the only issue is whether it be a 4-foot wall or a 6-foot wall. The 6-foot wall, I think, would be especially nice with the way we have it set up.
And what year was the house built?
1956.
Okay, thank you.
And that access to A1A has been there since 1956?
I beg your pardon?
That access to A1A has been there since 1956?
It has been, yes.
And this has been a residential use?
It's been a residential
than
use for most of the time.
Yeah.
Apparently, there was a small time that it was used as an office, and that's the thing that keeps us from having a non-conforming use.
Got it.
If I had a non-conforming use, I wouldn't have to be here today. But because of the fact that at one point it was used as an office, it creates the legal requirement for me to ask for the rezoning and the variances.
Good. Any other questions go ahead, Mr. Costa.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So to save you some time, coming back. Just want to clarify something with you and then direct it to staff. So variance 4, that 6-foot fence stops at the roadway. And the condition is to eliminate that access to A1A. I would assume that you'd want variance 4 to continue to the property line?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And then to staff, then that would be we'd add that as part of the condition? Would that be a problem? Continue variance 4 all the way to the property line? When they close that roadway?
No, I don't see an issue with that.
I'm sorry.
I said I don't see an issue with that. We
Okay,
continue it.
perfect. Thank you.
I have a comment about that. Wasn't there something in here about that?
Ms. Craig, go ahead. Speaking.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
That portion of the fence at the front, was it redesigned to allow for better view around onto A1A to the north?
I'm not sure if it was redesigned to allow for a better view of that area. Do you know? No, there hasn't been any, I mean, we could do that if necessary. I can certainly work along with my engineer for that.
'Cause I'm familiar with the property, and I feel like that your view is blocked if you want to pull out on A1A from the side street there, there's a problem seeing around that corner, and traffic up there is getting heavier all the time and more difficult to get out.
So,
Could I get you
Sir,
to come up to the mic?
and Ms. Craig, I appreciate that.
And if I could get your name and address for the record, sir.
Sure. Matt Berard, address 2260 Ocean Shore Boulevard. You can see on this diagram here where the road actually starts. It's at that bend, and people will pull all the way up. If you can see on the south side, kind of by where our north arrow is, that's where the stop sign is. So people would be stopping well past the fence. That's how it's used today.
I think the question she's having, though, is you see this corner here? Could that be rounded to provide a little additional?
And yes, that's our intent with this drawing here.
To provide some additional view shed. And I think we can make that part of the variance conditions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got one question. It seems sort of weird, Glenn, that this was ever used for any commercial.
I know.
Seems like it's sitting right in the middle of all residential.
I know.
Yeah.
But at the time, don't forget, A1A was a major road.
Right.
And so I think it was used as a realtor's office.
Gotcha. Oh, realtors, forget about that.
Right.
Yeah, forget about these guys. Yeah.
So it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah. Hey, this is like old school having you here and Chris and Scott in the same day. That's
I got to tell you,
the old days.
I really do enjoy seeing you
Yeah, we
guys.
miss you around here. Yeah.
Mr. Soria, what legal wording could we put in there so it wouldn't extend to the corner of the property and
You can
maintain that radius?
You can basically say that they'll be subject to was it a site triangle, line of sight and site triangle provisions. So it'll be reviewed by traffic engineering, traffic safety, to
Mhm.
ensure that basically you leave it up to the determination of your traffic specialist to make sure that you're not blocking line of sight.
But wouldn't that already be part of the permitting process when they submit for it?
Yes. Yeah,
Traffic
that's
engineer's
why
going
we
to look at
don't-
that anyways for line of sight, so we don't necessarily need to add it here. They're already going to do that as part of their due diligence cause.
That's my understanding
Yeah.
of the permit, but you can always put it as a condition.
I gotcha.
Saying, variance, I think, is that 4 and 5?
I'm just trying to limit my words when I make the motion.
We stipulated to the site triangle, so I think we're fine.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So we don't need the condition.
No, because it's going to be covered under the permit's going to, when they do the permit, they're going to basically dictate what that site triangle is.
Okay. All right. Is there any other questions for the applicant? All right, we'll see if we have any public participation. Do we have any? We don't have any. So
Get
we're
it,
gonna
Mr. Costa.
Close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion or motion, and we'll take the zoning first.
Yes, sir. Ready for a motion?
Go ahead.
I make a motion that we forward the rezoning application case number Z-24-015 to the county council for final action with a recommendation of approval.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to forward the rezoning application case number Z-24015 to the county council for final action with recommendation of approval for Mr. Costa and a second for Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion?
Nope.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next case, if I can get a motion on that one.
I make a motion on case V-24-077 to approve variances 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and variance 4 to approve it with the extension to the property line with the one staff recommended condition, which is closing the access point onto State Road A1A.
Second.
Okay,
That make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I want to, on the discussion on the motion, I would like to state, I thought we weren't closing the one on,
I agree. I didn't think we were closing A1A
Well, that's
either.
part of the condition.
I know, but we were talking about taking that.
That's why we
condition
made the
out.
sight line.
Then in that case, then the extension of variance 4 doesn't come into play, because it would basically close off that end, it goes to the property line. If you, that roadway, the extent, see how that 6-foot fence stops at the road. If we close that road, then they would need the additional to the end of the property line.
It stops at
Mr.
it stops
Costa?
at the driveway.
At the driveway, but, and that, one of their conditions is to remove that driveway from staff.
Variance 4 has to do with the height of the fence, I thought.
I see what you're saying, to move the condition to the, the
Right.
variance to the property line,
Correct.
rather than just stopping at the roadway.
Correct.
But if we leave this roadway in,
Then the variance says
the
as.
variance stays as is
Okay,
plotted on
gotcha.
the site plan.
Right.
Mr. Costa,
that- yes.
or I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Our traffic engineer was very specific that if we issue variances on this property, that we close that A1A entrance. There are several entrances from the side street, which they have determined are much safer. As far as your variance 4, the variance covers the entire length of the east
Okay.
side,
Okay.
so you don't have to worry about adding anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's true.
So do you want to
That's true.
close it or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a staff recommended condition. That's,
Okay.
if not, they're gonna kick
Okay.
it back in permitting.
Okay.
Got it. Okay,
Second.
okay.
Again, as long as we understand that the fence can go all the way to the end,
Yep,
we're good.
yep.
Okay. All right,
Okay,
all
we're
right.
good.
So,
Want to
we're
reread
gonna,
that?
I've got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa to approve variances 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5,
6.
and 6 for V-24-077. And and Ms. Smith said we do not have to.
She said it's already part of it to the end.
Okay,
We-
We're good.
with the one staff condition
Correct.
from Mr. Costa and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Now we're gonna go back to that ordinance and bring it into the ordinance 024005, which is part of our old unfinished business. Want to read that into the record, Ms. Shelley?
Okay. Case number 0-24-005, ordinance 2024-16, amending Chapter 72 of the Code of Ordinances to allow for shipping containers as an accessory structure in certain zoning classifications and establish regulation for use of said structures.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Mr. Ashley. Good to
Good
see
morning.
some older faces
It's still
today.
morning, yes. But it's a cleaner face, though. I got 5 days younger. Good morning again. This is ordinance 024-005, proposed ordinance 2014-16. This is a proposed change to Chapter 72 of the Code of Ordinances to allow shipping containers as an accessory structure in certain zoning classification and to establish some regulation standards for that structure. Just kind of a preface and background. Right now, the code specifically does not allow for shipping containers and anything similar to a shipping container as an accessory structure pursuant to our definition of accessory use and structure under Article 1 of Chapter 71 of the Code of Ordinances. At their hearing of October 2nd, 2023, the County Council directed staff to investigate how to allow the use of shipping containers as storage on properties with commercial and industrial zoning. At the County Council meeting on October 17th, 2023, county staff provided analysis and options for the potential regulations if the county decided to allow the shipping containers in non-residential zoning classifications. Again, their initial focus was on commercial and industrial, but through the discussion at that hearing, it was kind of a workshop on a couple of different ordinances. They included, or several of the members wanted included in residential areas, primarily agricultural rural areas, because they saw that as a item that would be befitting allowance in those areas. And one specific council person indicated they wanted to be clear that it be allowed on properties of at least 1 acre, that required at least 1 acre. So we have the rural zoning classifications in addition to which are not strictly agricultural classifications, but they are part of the rural area, and there was that preference for that. So we've included that in the ordinance as well. One of the things that was discussed and pointed out for allowance of this and what we should come back with in staff is look at how to regulate shipping containers, where they can go, obviously zoning classification, where you place it on the property. That would get into how do you site it, using setbacks. Also, there was discussion of screening, height, and things of that nature. And staff has tried to extrapolate that information from what the council discussion happened last October into the ordinance you have before you. Changes have been made since the last meeting, try to provide a clear purpose intent, which is listed on page 7 of the agenda item. We also included new definition in the code for a shipping container. We've modified the accessory use and structure definition to address the shipping container usage. Also, to make it more clear from our discussion at the last meeting, the shipping container, if it's used in conjunction with an agricultural use on land classified as agricultural by the property appraiser, is exempt from these regulations. And I do one correction. It was referenced in the staff report and in the beginning of the ordinance, the whereas, but I failed to add it to the actual code section on page 7 and 8. And that would be that the non-residential PUDs would also be allowed to have shipping containers. So I want to make that adjustment at this time. One of the things that I did want to discuss with you that I've looked at some of the different ordinances we've looked at and want to present to you. I think there was some discussion, I think maybe Mr. Costa, on the number of shipping containers. And that was kind of a decision point I want to bring up to let you decide. We've looked at different ordinances where they allow 1, 2, some of them do by so many per acre. You know, you can have 1 and then you can have 1 for every so many acres to a maximum number, or just if you have so much land, if you have at least 5 acres or 10 acres in one instance, then you can have 1 basically for every 5 acres of land you have. So there's some variety of different options. So I want to present that to you. I think there was some discussion on the number issue last time. Let you decide, and we'll add it to the ordinance. It's up to you whether or not you want to address that issue on the numbers. So I put that to you.
Okay.
All right. I really don't have much more else to go over. I presume you have some questions for me, so I'll be happy to address them at this time.
Okay. Mr. Costa.
Yep. Two started questions, and then I want to hold the rest of my questions till after I hear from Mr. Nagel. As it looks like we're maybe on some of the same pages. RC, why is RC left off?
RC is a resource corridor designation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't allow for, there's a limitation on the impact to the property and the use, and it was not one of the zonings because of the environmentally sensitive nature of that zoning classification. That's why it was left off.
But RC can also be used for grazing of cattle.
It can be used for grazing, yes, and silviculture. But if that's
where the container comes into play.
Well, if that's the pleasure of the commission, you can certainly add that in.
Yeah.
We'll
that's why I'm bringing it up, is because I know there's several large parcels that are RC that are used for cattle grazing that a container either already currently exists or would readily be existing. The second question I have is on the exception for exempted agricultural uses. You added except for. Can you explain to me this the flood hazard management ordinance and how that entails?
Well, if this property is located, if you have an agriculturally exempt property, but is in under your floodplain, any structure has to get a permit.
Mhm.
That's state law.
That's not a building permit. That is the state exempts non-residential farm buildings on the farm from the building code. However, it does not exempt them from your flood hazard mitigation permits, which we do. So it's not a building permit. It's make sure that accessory structure it meets the flood requirements.
More detail, please.
So we've got, so essentially you have to, was it? It's our flood hazard mitigation provisions in chapter 72. So that
72,
is the-
756?
Yes.
Yes. So that is the only section of the code that by statute applies to non-residential farm buildings on a farm by statute. So that's
That applies to any structure.
any structure.
Yeah.
So, it could be a shipping container, it could be a large barn. State statute says, hey, you can ignore all the county codes except this code, with the flood hazard mitigation code.
I guess in following up what Mr. Costa's saying, is there a need for that to even be in there? Because that required is the same for any structure you put on your property, regardless if it's a shipping container.
If
or
you
a
leave it off,
pole
it
barn or
wouldn't really
whatever.
affect it. It's just, we would just tell them. It's just kind of inform people that if you have a shipping container and you have a farm and an agricultural classification, you can basically you're exempt from the restrictions in this section, but if you put it in the floodplain, you still have to comply with the flood plain code.
More of a notification.
And I believe the building official asked for that clarification, just so that, people come in with the correct expectations. So, we would apply it regardless. This is just informing, I guess, people with an agricultural
It
classification.
would be just a warning, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You're not
I can
imposing.
live with a warning.
Yes, you're not imposing a new regulation that is on top of an existing provision. This is just informing people who have shipping containers and on agricultural property. If you put it in a floodplain, you're going to have to meet the floodplain requirements, but we don't require a building code, we don't require a building permit or any other type of permit.
For a bona fide ag.
Yes.
All right. Okay, I'm going to reserve the rest of my questions till after Mr. Nagel.
Okay, any other questions for for staff? For Mr. Ashley?
Are we trying to decide how many containers per acre or whatnot today or not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
but
gonna
I want to
discuss
see
that.
what
Okay,
Nagel has to
gotcha.
say.
Okay. All right, Mr. Ashley, they want to hear from Mr. Nagel, and then we'll probably have some more questions or comments to you. Okay. Do we have any other public participation forums other than this one? Okay. Mr. Nagel? If I could get your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Christian Nagel. I live at 350 Stillbrook Trail in the community of Enterprise. I presented to the county staff yesterday my comments. I also brought another markup and strike-through version of the code that include my recommended changes to the code and recommended improvements to the code. I wanted to mention, I didn't get to last time, I hope I'm going to run out of 3 minutes, but I am fortunate enough to be have 40 years of professional planning experience. I also was fortunate to work for 17 years for Volusia County in Planning and Development Services. I also was fortunate to write or help write at least 2 different zoning ordinance amendments for Volusia County. So I appreciate the efforts that the staff's making. I appreciate the efforts PLDRC's meeting. Y'all are on the right road. You just need to keep the truck going a little bit more to make some further improvements and refinements to the code. And I thank Mr. Ashley for recognizing the need to accommodate the shipping containers on the non-residential portions of a PUD zoning classification. But my biggest thing I want you to consider is that the proposal is that you're going to allow shipping containers in the RR zoning classification, the rural residential classification. I'm sorry, that particular classification is a residential classification. It's not an agricultural classification. It's a residential classification. Nor is and agricultural uses there. It's not an agricultural use either. If you're doing agricultural uses on RR, you have to have a single-family dwelling on the property, and you're keeping and raising your crops and animals is restricted to the personal use of the people who happen to reside there. So it is a residential classification. It is not an agricultural classification at all. And so I ask that the ordinance be amended to not allow shipping containers in RR zoning classification. I don't believe it's appropriate. The second change recommendation for you is that I'd ask for the ordinance, the staff to look at the ordinance a little bit better and look at to better define where the structures can go. You can start by amending the proposed adding or working on the definitions for setbacks and uplands. Those terms are used in this proposed ordinance, but they're not defined in the Article 1 of the county code. So that would be a nice improvement also. And the last thing I'd ask for you to consider, we had lots of discussion today about wetlands and trying to avoid wetland impacts and wetland buffers. We had a gentleman that wanted to build a house in a wetland buffer or wetland today. I'd ask you to consider to also prohibit these proposed shipping containers in wetlands, wetland buffers, platted easements, and utility easements. You've got basically you've got a minimum 1 acre size requirement for allowing use of the shipping containers. There should be adequate space to locate your shipping container out of these areas and to maintain their already designated uses. And I thank everybody for your efforts here, and I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the ability to speak before you.
Okay. The wetlands buffer, Mr. Soria, that would refer back to the requirements that we previously were talking about. Is that correct?
Well, I can't remember. Typically, did we allow accessory structures in the wetland buffer? It would, if so, it would require a wetland alteration permit.
Yeah.
This commission can restrict shipping containers even more and say, hey, you can't even place these in the wetland buffer. Don't even try to come in for a wetland alteration permit.
I see what you're saying.
Right. Because otherwise, I mean, it's treated as an accessory structure to the principal use. So that's why it meets the same kind of principal setbacks, principal yards. We treat the locational criteria in the same way as locating a principal structure. So if they're proposing it in the wetland buffer, they would have to go through a wetland impact permit. But if the commission chooses otherwise, you can say, no, don't, keep it outside of that even.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nagel. We do have a question for you from Mr. Costa.
Yep. So let's go back to the RR.
Sir.
Rural residential.
That's the name of it.
That's the name of it. So I could own 40 acres of RR property, and you're denying me in a container on my property.
That was my comment. That's y'all's decision.
No,
whether or not you want to do that or not.
I mean, I'm agreeing with you on some of these items. I just want to get clarification on that. But that's what I'm looking at. Is I'm looking at those parcels, those rural parcels that are held in large volume, and by eliminating the RR, I think we're knocking out a few that potentially would be usable of these containers.
Well, I agree with you there on, especially if you gave using your example.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but if you're going to allow them NRR. I would encourage the staff to work on the ordinance some more so you can have some better locational standards for them. Unfortunately, because of, at least based on my memory, I could be wrong, but unfortunately, this ordinance has been amended. Last time, the last version of this ordinance said that you couldn't have a shipping container behind the, in front of the front plane of a structure.
Right.
That's been taken out. Now, under this one, it says, well, that limitation's only applied to commercial and industrial zoned properties. And I realize why that is, okay, because of a state statute requirement concerning residential properties. But I would encourage the staff to work on, hey, if you're going to allow them in RR, let's see what we can do so they're not sitting
well, there's,
in a front, at least not in a front yard.
Yeah, and there's one of the questions that come up. So we're also in the statute, we're talking about limiting it to maximum of 2 per parcel. So two storage containers on a 1 acre parcel is pretty hideous in my mind.
Right.
And I'm pretty liberal when it comes to usage of your land. That's pretty hideous scenario. And other than the RR, the only other zoning classification that is a minimum of 1 acre is the MH4s. So I don't know if maybe we should limit this to parcels of 2.5 and above for storage containers. Is that too restrictive? It depends on how the rest of my colleagues feel, but that's...
I'd have to defer to Mr. Ashley. I don't have all the minimum lot sizes required memorized for all the zoning classifications.
Well, I had to look them up. That's why I know.
So I don't know if they all, if any of them are less, all the rest of them are 2.5 acres or more.
Yeah.
The exception would be on a PUD. They can be less than 2.5 acres in size, but I'm not too worried about PUDs because in PUDs you negotiate with the applicant to get something that works for everybody. So I'm not concerned about that.
Okay.
But I am concerned about a shipping container being, I got an RR zone property, I got a residential home, and I end up with a shipping container that's in front of my house.
And I agree. And
in front of all my neighbors' houses, also an RR zone property.
2, actually. You could have 2.
You'd have 2 of them there. And under this ordinance, there's no size limit to the size. By the way, there's no specific size limit to the containers. Nor is there a specific height requirement to the containers.
Yeah. We put a minimum, we have a minimum size.
Minimum.
Below that, we don't consider that a shipping container. It's more like one of those
But you don't have a maximum. I don't,
because we want to separate
I understand why you don't have those in the ordinance. It gets very difficult to administer it. You get people coming in here for variances.
Sure.
They got something a little different. So I understand why you're not in there. But yes, I am all in favor of having at least a maximum number of containers you can have on your property. I'm going to leave it up to the PLDRC to come up with a good number. But 2 is a good start, but if you want to be a little bit more liberal, that's fine. I just want, if you're going to have shipping containers, I don't want them in front of people's residential homes. And that's difficult to do with the state statute requirements as I remember them, but I could be wrong. But at least keep them out of a front yard and out of a side street yard.
And again, when you're talking residential home, you're talking an acre.
I got a residential home and I'm going to end up with a shipping container in front of it? Or 2 of them?
In front of the plane, not necessarily in front of it.
Right. Well, it could be,
but if you're on in front of it. Let's take my property, for instance. So I'm on 5 acres.
Right.
My property my home sits halfway back on my 5 acres.
Yeah.
So now I've got 2.5 in the front, 2.5 in the back. Because of the location of the cattle and the entrance to the roadway, my shipping container would be forward of my front plane of my house. And on 5 acres, who cares? On 1 acre, it becomes an issue. I agree with you.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying that if we limit it to...
I appreciate it. We're on the right page. Right. Now we're talking about something important. Now we're talking about where your wonderful shipping container ends up in front, potentially in front of residential
Right, because I think we've had several variances where we've done that and allowed it to go forward of the front plane based on the type of property that it was at.
Yes, and that would be their option, of course, depending on what standards you set. But right now, this proposed ordinance needs a little bit more further improvement to do that.
It needs some
if
tweaking.
Y'all are in favor of not allow these shipping containers in front of people's homes.
I don't want to create additional variances requests for things
No,
like
I don't
that.
either.
Yeah.
I like the ordinance to be designed so nobody has to apply for the variance, nobody has to sit through the variances. And besides, last time I looked, and now admittedly, that was 4 years ago, but in my humble opinion, about over 90% of the variance applications got approved. I don't know, but that was 4 years ago. It may be different today.
Maybe different today.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
Okay.
Okay, Stoney, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just hate to see any container put on somebody's land that's less than 2.5 acres.
There you go.
I think that should be a minimum.
Okay, then you're gonna need to change the RR, then they wouldn't be allowed in RR, because RR's got a minimum 1 acre.
I would say with the exceptions.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
if somebody's got 1 acre RR, I don't think they should have a container in their yard.
I own 40 acres in Port Orange that is zoned RR. 40 acres continuous, so
And
you're
you should
saying that
have
I cannot put
containers,
a container on there because
There it goes.
Yeah, but I'm saying there should be a minimum lot size.
Yeah, a minimum lot size before you can have a shipping container, with the exception of the PUD classification, because lots of you got variable lot sizes on there, and with a PUD application, you got the ability to propose zoning orders changes you couldn't get otherwise.
Right.
Under the code. So.
Okay. What about people that use shipping containers for homes?
Well, yeah.
Well,
you need a little bit more work on that too. If you saw my
Well, that's
strike through and underline, just to be safe. I mean,
I hated to throw that out there, but it's
yeah.
well, that's coming. They're making those and they're shipping them up to North Carolina right now
Yeah.
as temporary housing.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, any other questions for Mr. Nagel?
Thank you much
All
for
right,
letting
thank
me.
you, sir.
Yep.
Let me participate. This is something I get very
Well, we appreciate
motivated by.
You give us some
and
insight on what
glad
the
you
thought
didn't-
is, because
Right.
you know
I'm glad you
sometimes-
didn't restrict me to 3 minutes. Thank you much.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We don't have any other. Okay. You want to, Scott, come back?
Yeah,
up
please.
next? Mr. Ashley, could you come back, please? You've heard the discussion on RR.
Yes, sir.
Is right now, is it omitted from the allowing it?
Well, one of the first things that I guess we should discuss is, we've already talked about the RC, that I think I'd like to see
Right.
the RC in there. Okay. It's the number of units, number of containers per parcel. And the problem that I have with limiting it to per parcel is the same as that we just had. So if you have if you're on a 1 acre, you're allowed 2 units. If I've got 100 acres, I'm only allowed 2 containers. And I think that's where we need to separate that. I really don't have a problem with Mr. Sixma's suggestion that the property be a minimum of 2.5 and above to have a container. I think that eliminates the crossover on, any RRs that are actually more residential than they are rural. What's your, I'd like to get more opinion on that for those of us who live in the country.
What
Just for
about the
clarity, then.
location?
Again, the location, I don't, yeah, it depends on the property size.
Okay.
Because we're allowing that now from a standpoint of a variance standpoint on accessory structures and dwellings, accessory dwellings. Why would this be any different? Again, in a residential setting, yes, it would be a hideous thing to have a container forward of your front line. But on a 5 acre parcel or a 2.5 acre parcel that it's 10 feet above, again, it's not, we're not picturing here's the house and the container sitting in front of it. It could be off to the side, but forward of the plane.
Because a lot of people have, with the acres, they have barns, pole barns and stuff. It's
Correct.
actually in front of the house on the side.
So you're saying that RR can be less than 2.5 acres?
RR has
So
a
you're
minimum of
saying-
1 acre.
So you're
Yeah.
saying put in a minimum of 1 acre on RR, correct?
I'd say minimum 2.5.
2.5.
But this is the point I'm trying to get at. We have agricultural classifications that are less than 2.5, the A1.
Modified.
The A3 is a 1
A3.
acre. That's why if I could, a question. Because the discussion came up from Mr. Nagel that the RR, because of being residential. And one element of that is that zoning only allows agricultural pursuits, if you will, keeping of animals, raising crops for personal use only, not resale. So it's not a true agricultural classification.
Right.
If that is a concern, then we need to drop out the MH4, the MH8, the RA, and the RR. If you don't mind those zonings, but you want a minimum standard of 2.5 acres across the board, then yes, A3 has a 1 acre, we'd have to make it a 2.5 acre. RR would be half, and MH4 would have to be, okay, you're a minimum 1 acre lot, but you gotta have at least 2.5 acres to do a shipping
This is
container.
the point I'm getting at
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
what I'm talking about,
So-
yes. Because I could be an RR
Well, it's not the
zone, but
zoning,
have
it's more the
30,
acreage
you
standard.
know, yes, combined.
Okay.
Same with an MH4. Even though it's a minimum of 1, I could be
Okay.
sitting on a 5-acre parcel.
And then on the plane issue, that was the question you had last time, Mr. Costa, and that's why we changed the code. About, because you felt that was not necessary for ag property. Because like you just described here, the
Not
house
for
could be
ag,
up,
correct.
could be in the middle of the lot, but, you know, where it needs to be is forward of the house.
Mhm.
So that is why the modification to what you see today.
What number are we on?
This is page
I renumber
eight.
these because your numericals are out of
Yes,
sequence.
I see that. It would be the true number 4, shipping container shall be located behind the front plane or facade on commercial, the
Commercial
principal
industrial
structure.
zone. Okay, got it.
Okay, and then we say,
Got it.
and we only address it for those.
Yep. So that's a requirement on those 2 particular zone parcels. I'm
Right.
okay with.
Okay.
C and I only, okay. The one thing that and we'll come back to the minimum size and the number, if you don't mind. You and I discussed it, Mr. Chair, last time, is that we're only addressing this for bona fide ag exempt. How do we deal with the rural class and the requirements item 1, 2, 3, and actually 1, 2, and 3 now, because 4 is for only commercial and industrial.
Well, we're applying to it just like any other accessory structure that would be allowed on those
So you're making
classifications.
them go
That's
through
why
the
they,
permitting process, putting it on a pad, and that's where I'm thinking that we may be.
I don't think it needs to be on a pad. It just needs to be, what, secured?
secured.
Yeah,
I
I don't think we're requiring an actual concrete pad. It just needs to be
Well, in
stabilized,
the code,
right?
but if you don't want it, then we can strike it. Just similar language to the other ordinances, because that's a better way to, how they secure it to the ground by bolting it to a foundation or a pad.
Well, this is my point that we spoke about before, is that if you got an agriculture exemption, which you consider a bona fide agriculture,
Mhm.
they have no restrictions on as far as what can go, and they can have the same zoning classification as your next door neighbor, but yet he has to go through different hoops in order to put that shipping container on there.
Same thing if you build a
And
garage.
this is a
it's-
problem I've had the whole time, and
Okay.
we've had this discussion
Yeah, yeah.
numerous times, is that if you got an agriculture zoning, when you buy the property and the adjacent property owners know that it's the agriculture zoning, that they should have the same requirements and setbacks as your bona fide agriculture. I know where this come in previously. So to put additional restrictions just because it's not bona fide ag, because, you know, the bona fide ag may change next month. They may sell it, and now it's not bona fide ag, but they still have that shipping container there. So my point is that to make it bona fide ag, I think is, if you're going to stick with ag, you need to put agricultural zoning, and rather than bona fide ag. And I know where this comes from. You know, I mean, one bad apple destroyed it for everybody, because it used to be that way. And then they started putting in big barns to store cars and stuff and covered up the whole property. I get it. But unfortunately, it had a big ripple effect on everybody else who owns agricultural property. They can't get the same benefit as in bona fide agriculture right beside them. And so that's where I'm at with that. And you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm in agreement there, and I'm not sure how to address that in this particular case without leaving them all out of the equation.
Well, if it's rather than saying bona fide ag, if it's just ag zoning for that,
Which is your A1 through A4.
there you go. And if you're putting a restriction on the size of the property, that would pretty much,
So your MH3 and your MH8 would,
2.5 acres, so you already got the size limitation there.
so your MH3s and MH8s, which are also in the rurals, would require, unless they were bona fide ag, would require to go through this process.
Well, if it's MH or RR, either one, because that's more of a residential classification, yeah, that I can understand that.
Okay.
It required going through the permitting process on that. Okay? If they put a utility shed, are they going to increase that to 400 square foot, by the way? The utility shed, right now it's 100.
I don't know. That would be a building code
Yeah.
change.
Someone was talking about increasing that. I heard that on the council discussion.
Right.
The increasing it to 400 square foot.
The 400, and less than 400, they don't need a permit, but they do need, I'll need to check.
Yeah, because right now it's 100, I think. And so, and we could look at it that way, because if you get, if we're going to require this, I just can't see giving one benefit over the other. And on residential, which is RR, MH, what is it, MH5?
3.
MH3? I don't have the ordinance in
3,
front
4,
of me.
and 8 are on here.
Okay, and so those zonings are more of a residential zoning, and so obviously they would have to go through the permitting process.
You say that, and then I have to smile, because MH3 is prevalent down Kersey Road when they're all 5-acre farms.
Really?
Yes, sir. I'm MH3.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. When that was all subdivided out and plotted out, that's why I'm saying, so MH3 is deceiving. Yes, you're right. In a perfect world, MH3 would be in a residential setting, but MH3s are in fact bona fide ags.
Okay.
And working farms currently. That may not be. I've got, all the neighbors have got horses. I mean, whether they're a agricultural, business or not, but they are definitely in a rural agricultural vein.
And MH3 is a 5-acre minimum.
5 acres, yeah.
It's MH4, it's 1 acre.
Is 1 acre. Well, that's what I'm saying. That comes back to the limiting of.
Well, you go back to
setting limit
size,
to a
yeah.
minimum size.
Well, then we're going to be regulating, you want to regulate use issues, because, if it's a garage, you got to go through a permitting. Well, I don't ask if the garage is going to be used for agricultural use unless you, the applicant, tell us this is going to be for agricultural purposes. Same thing with shipping container. It's going to be an accessory structure. Here are the standards for it. I'm not asking, unless you tell me that you're using it for ag, you've got to go through the whole permitting process just like any other accessory structure. But you just want to clear, so what kind of notes I need to, if it's going forward, do you want to exempt out this because it's on an ag zoning, or because it might be used ag? I mean, that's the kind of wording that I know you're struggling with, but I got to then translate it into prepare the council report. How do you want to address that? Yeah.
That's the part that's giving me a little bit of heartburn.
Well, the MH3, which is an agricultural classification, and with the residential. It's a sub-classification of agriculture.
Okay.
Is it not?
I don't know.
Ms. Smith?
They all allow residential use.
On the MH3.
MH3, the A1, A2, A3, those are all, you have a lot of areas that are just, like A3 is an agricultural zoning, but you have areas that basically it's farming. It's not like
here's where I'm going
a
with
horse
this.
or something.
Whenever you use the
it's
word
not-
bona fide agriculture,
Yeah.
and it's an agricultural zoning, this bona fide agriculture is where I had the heartburn. And
well,
I mean, if you buy a piece of property that's zoned agriculture, you should expect that you've got the agricultural uses being used beside it. And you should be able to use the same as your
Right.
adjacent property owners. That's what that's.
But that
that's where I'm
exemption
going.
is, well, if
Now,
you're,
to address his concerns on the MH3, let's look at it independently if we need be. Now, my concern is the agricultural properties. And if
They
you
should
want to
just-
address the MH3, if you got some stipulation there, and we're already going to it sounds to me like we're pretty much going to limit the size.
Well, let's talk about that one then. So
I mean, they can be separated. They just it doesn't have to be a broad sweep of the brush. You
Right.
can put that in a different sentence, you know.
You
of the
want
image.
separate for true ag zonings and rural zonings?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could make different stipulations for that, and would encompass your RR zoning. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a broad sweep of the brush.
Non-ag
and-
uses
and
have a higher threshold, like 2.5. A3, because that's an ag use, maybe doesn't have that threshold. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, it depends on what he wants to do
Right,
with
yeah.
MH3. Now, he's got an opinion on that, so I'll let him try
I
to
do because
construct that.
there's several farms that are being impacted by something like
I agree. Hey,
that are
I'm
not, that
in
may not,
disagreement.
and I'm not sure that they are or not, but they may not be bona fide ag.
How would you structure that into this ordinance then? That's the question.
Well, yeah, it would have to be back on page, on page 7 of 11, basically where it says that where he states that bona fide ag is exempt, it would have to include bona fide ag and bona fide ag and any ag zone properties
Well, I want to take out the bona fide ag
completely.
on the agricultural properties.
You just want to put it as agricultural,
Agriculture on the ag properties, yes.
both commercial and or personal?
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
That's where I'm at with that, because I've been stating this, and it's just not specifically to this ordinance. It's across the board. Well, how you treat one agricultural property, you can have one sitting in the middle of two bona fide agricultural exempt properties, and they can do, I'm not going to say whatever they want, but they can. There's more benefit to those two than it is me sitting in the middle, because I'm not agriculture exempt for bona fide ag.
Correct.
And this is the problem I have with this, and have had it.
How do we write that, Mr. Ashley?
Well, then
We just take out the bona fide ag.
do that,
for the
and only
agriculture-
shipping containers are allowed to be exempt no matter what, because it's on ag. But any other accessory structure
Meet the
still has to meet
size requirement.
the size. Okay,
size requirement.
the 2.5 acres.
A minimum of 2.5 acres?
Mm-hmm.
How does everybody feel about
Oh, yeah.
that?
I totally agree.
But now we have to address your MH3 and your RR zoning. How do you want to word that?
Well, can I just follow along on page 7 then? B2, the shipping container used in conjunction with an agricultural use.
Can you speak? I can barely hear
Period.
you.
With the code section that on page 7 of the agenda,
Mm-hmm.
just be clear, under B1, the applicability, your proposal is a shipping container used in conjunction with agricultural use is exempt, strike everything else in between, is exempt from provision of this section, except for the flood hazard management ordinance, correct? Is that what you're looking for?
Let's read that one more time, please.
A shipping container used in construction with an agricultural use is exempt from the provisions of this section, except for the flood hazard management ordinance requirements of Article 3, Division 7 of Chapter 72.
So we're dropping the on land classified property appraiser pursuant to.
I understood that's what you're looking for.
Striking all that. Agricultural use. Yeah, it still doesn't address the zones.
I mean, that, you just went back and forth, said whether exempt or not exempt.
Doesn't address the additional zonings, which would be.
Well, I mean, that's one
MH5,
step.
RR.
Yep.
We'd have to add a second or a third applicability section, but
And
as
throw
far as
in
your
the
ag issue.
MH3s and 8s. MH4, again, here's what I'm looking at. I know that these are minimum sizes. So in an MH4 parcel, it's a minimum 1 acre parcel.
Mhm.
But an MH4 could exist as a 20 acre parcel. And to
Yes.
basically knock them out of the equation.
Well, that's why you put in the size limitation of 2.5.
Okay. Okay. So then we have to include all of these into this exempt sentence, or additional sentence here, is adding the MH3 through 8.
Well, MH8
and
is.
including the RR and the, including the RR, basically at that point of 2.5 acres or larger.
Well, you need to address the location.
If it's 2.5 acres or larger, the location it's basically a moot point. It's similar to anything else. As far as if it's under 2.5 acre, you're not getting a container on it. That's how I'm envisioning. That's what I'm hearing here. Unless it's a commercial or a commercial industrial use, which now comes to, your less than 2.5 acres is going to be your feed farms and your different businesses locations. So I'm more concerned about the rural community than I am the business industrial section of this.
I get it. I'm right with you.
You're with me. I'm just at a loss for how to how to word this that makes sense.
But you're still sticking with only agricultural use classifications being exempt, because RA, RR, MH4, and MH8 are not agricultural zoning. They're personal use only.
That's right. That's
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to lump those in there as either as a separate sentence.
Oh, right, okay.
That's why I said separate them.
Yeah.
So, okay, they're still permitting and whatever, but 2.5 acres.
At a minimum.
But all ag
Before we start.
zonings, they're going to be exempt, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense to you? Because it's pretty clear as mud to me. If you can write this in a fashion that I like, then I'll be
here's my understanding of
impressed.
the proposal. So,
Yeah.
you have B2, which is the exemption for ag classified, your bona fide ag property. What the proposal, as I'm hearing, is just to make that apply to all agricultural zoning classifications is exempt from the provisions of this section, with the exception of the flood hazard mitigation, because that's required. And then when we go to C for the location, obviously take out your ag zonings there because they're exempt.
Right.
And then you make the rest of those non-commercial and non-industrial zoning classifications have a minimum 2.5 acres, to address the concerns of regardless of zoning classification.
But we're going to put in the minimum size requirement on the ag properties also.
Oh, yeah, you can do that as well. So,
Yeah,
B2, so
Because
A1 to A4 of at least 2.5 acres, you're exempt from this provision. And then for the rest of it, you need at least 2.5 acres to have a shipping container, and you're subject to the rest of the terms.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
Okay.
No. Because you're going back to the beginning. I want the MH3 through 8s as well as the RRs to be also exempt, as similar, same as the agricultural property, as long as they're 2.5 acres or larger. I don't want them to have to go through this. Now you're back to me.
That
Yeah,
would be
you just-
different.
Yeah, it would be.
So basically, because the MH3s, you're looking at, these are parcels that are being used in a agricultural, in a rural, let's call it rural setting, okay? So they're boarding horses, they've got family cattle. They may not be in the business of, but they are in the agricultural world. And that's where we start separating, because it's not just on the A properties that agriculture is happening. It's happening on the MH properties as well.
Okay. So it's all A's, RRs, RA, and MH, and all the
MH3,
Ms
4, and
of
8,
at least 2.5 acres exempt from the provisions of this section.
Right.
What does that leave?
It
Just
leaves
your Bs
commercial
and your
industrial.
Is. Okay.
Well, what if you're RR and you have, okay.
Well,
And your RR, again, your has to be over
Has-
2.5.
so not
I'm
less than,
assuming if
but-
you have less than 2.5 acres and you are not business or industrial, you can't have a shipping container. Is that
But
the
I don't
intent?
think you can get an ag exemption under 2.5 acres anyways. If I'm not mistaken, I think the cutoff is 3 acres minimum. So you can't be a bona fide ag under 2.5 under 3 acres.
It's all how you define bona fide ag, and this would go
Well,
back.
it goes back. Yes,
You have like apiaries
under
or
the
something
county's
like that.
guise of.
I'm not sure the property appraiser has I think there's case law. You can't have, but the property appraiser cannot have a minimum size. It's a lot of factors that they look at on whether or not to designate something. So you can have like an apiary which is small lot, get a bona fide classification from the property appraiser. So minimum size isn't a 100% guarantee, but for purposes of whether or not a shipping container needs to meet this criteria, you can set a minimum size. Just, on average, parcels less than 2.5 are not engaged in either, an actual or hobby type agricultural activity.
And also what I think one of Mr. Nagel's concerns is that putting these containers in the front yard on our zoning, MH 5 and 3 or whatever.
Mhm.
So,
But we're eliminating the 1 acre. We're setting it at 2.5, are we not?
yeah.
So, I mean, when you're exempting these, basically none of these criteria apply, so we're not subjecting them to the principal setbacks or anything like that. They're just, my understanding is you want us to treat them in the same way as a non-residential farm building on a farm. Essentially, you know, as long as they are compliant with the floodplain requirements, they can put these anywhere.
No matter the use. So, yeah, you're basically, we're limited the ordinance from what you're describing to just commercial industrial now. That's where we're headed. Because you sound like you want to exempt everything as long as it's 2.5 acres.
On the size.
You can't have a strip container without 2.5 acres, and if you're 2.5 acres and larger, you're totally exempt. So we won't have any standards for it because there's no way to review for it if there's no permit to go by. So,
Size, 2.5 acres.
well, how are we going to know? You don't come in. We can tell somebody that, but there's nothing. They're not coming into us to find out did I do it right, unless it turns in code compliance issue. I guess if somebody wants to complain, they don't have 2.5 acres.
Well, that'll
Yeah, that's
the 1
another
acre-
thing.
That'll be the 1 acre parcel complaining that 2.5 acres got a container and they can't get one. That'll be the call.
And then as a dimensional requirement, I don't know, can they ask for variance
To what?
on the 2.5 acre requirement? It's not I want to be clear, so we don't go down the road.
I think so, yeah. It's a dimensional requirement that's connected to an accessory
It's not
use.
the lot size of the zoning, it's the dimensional standard for this particular structure.
Yes. But, I mean, so I'm not sure we're ready to approve and send this to council.
No, I think that this particular paragraph needs to be defined. To define that basically, I just don't want to eliminate people needlessly and have them go through a process that they don't need to go through if we can take care of this here at this table. Since we're on that subject, and I agree with you, I think we're going to have to kick this can down to the next, to another revision. Let's talk about the maximum number.
Give them some guidance.
Yeah, let's talk about the maximum number of units per parcel. Or do we want to limit that per maximum units per acre, container-wise? Right now, the way it's written, it says you're limited to a maximum of 2 containers per parcel, period. That's
What if you have 100 acres?
no, that's my point. How do we tweak that to basically specify? Maximum. Go ahead. Go.
We could 2.5 acres, and then for every 2.5 acres after that, we could put 1 container.
Do we have put a cap on it? Number of containers
Yeah,
total?
You got to put a cap on it.
If not, we start making storage yards.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm logically,
Yeah.
I would be comfortable with a
Total of 5?
I was going to go 6. I like even numbers.
Okay.
Maximum of 6. So if you got 100 acres, 6 containers spread out over 100, you're not going to,
Yeah. But a container for every 2.5 acres is a lot, though.
Well, you're allowing 2 per parcel.
Yeah, right.
Okay, what about that 20-acre piece? You can have up to 5, is what you're saying? Or 6?
The way it's currently laid out. I mean, no, not the way it's currently laid out. The way we're proposing it, yes. And so we have to limit it somehow. Got to put a limiter on there.
Yeah. Well,
I like the 2 per parcel, but I don't want to restrict it per parcel. I want to restrict it per size.
for the additional 2.5.
Or 1 for every
up to a
5?
Total of 5.
Or 1 for every 5 after the first 2.5, up to a maximum of 6 total.
Yeah.
If you can kind of write that in a way that we can understand it.
For the first 2.5, you could have up to, the first 2.5, you can have two
Two.
storage containers.
Correct.
And then for every 2.5 after that, you can have one additional up to 6 total.
Yes.
Every 2.5 is what you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on a 5-acre parcel, your maximum is 3.
3, yes.
On a 15, you're
That
4.
work, Mr. Sori, does that sound logical?
Yeah,
or-
yeah. It'll be a math question, but that's, it's this isn't unique to, when you count the number of things, you said
No.
a minimum, and then and then afterwards you can set a ratio and then you cap it. That's pretty common. So my understanding is you get 2 for the first 2.5, and every 2.5 after that you get an additional 1 up to a maximum 5 or 6. 6?
Yeah.
6.
We got to put a cap on that because you don't have a little 1 acre A4 or was it A3 on the 1 acres?
A3 is 1 acre.
1 acre lot with 2 storage containers behind it, do we?
No, I think that's
I
what
don't
we're.
think so.
I think that's
And
what we're.
just to clarify, the cap, we are applying it to the zoning designations you want to exempt from the rest of it, but they're not going to be exempt from the cap.
From the count.
From the
It will
cap.
not be exempt from the count.
Okay,
That
all
the
right.
count applies to everybody.
Okay.
I think the count applies to everybody, and I think the minimum lot size should also apply to everybody, which is 2.5, correct?
But are we getting a permit for them, or are we exempting them from that process to track that?
So that's where it does come in. Pardon, sir?
Are we, but I got the impression you wanted to exempt them from permitting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to regulate or follow that, implement that. Other than somebody has complained, hey, we think they got too many, then we'll have to ask, I guess, surveys and counts and.
Yeah, I see where you're going, but that would be more of a code enforcement, would
Yes,
it
it
not?
would. Yeah, and then they're going to wonder, how am I figuring this out? Well,
Well, I mean, obviously, if anybody puts anything anywhere, they call to find, or should, if they need a permit or not. And that time, they could be informed that if they put a shipping container, they have to have a minimum of 2.5 acres, and this is what it is. And for every 2 containers, and then anything above that, they have to have a minimum of 2.5, up to 6 containers total. But I mean, most people don't know what they have to have permits for.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't matter. I mean, they'd put them in there without a permit, even if a permit was required.
Drop and go.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the next rev, honestly.
I mean, I don't want to make it too where you have a bunch of shipping containers all over the place. But yeah, they're being used now. We just have to make them legal.
right, because they are being cited.
They're being cited for code enforcement,
Mhm.
and so that's where we're just making them legal. And at what point are we being too restrictive on what is allowed on a piece of property or
Mhm.
not? And if
One
it's-
thing I'd like to throw in is the way you guys have it proposed now, you could have 4 on a 10-acre parcel. That seems like a lot. That seems like a lot of
Well, that-
containers for 10 acres.
Well, that's why I threw out, if you got your 2.5, then if you double that, 1 for every 5 after that, because then you're
That's
doubling.
what I would, yeah.
Something like that.
you want to restrict?
I think 4 for 10 acres is way too many.
I just do that as a
I have no
reference.
problem with
You
that.
had
I mean, if
2.5 as
that's-
a starting point, I just doubled it up. So you
Two-
get 1 additional for
2.5,
every
but-
double, basically, of the 2.5, so 5.
We're
It's a
talking one
suggestion to
container
you.
though,
Let's
so-
let you talk.
So a
chew
5-acre
on that.
parcel still at 3 at that point, and then if you go to 10, you're potentially at 4 maximum.
Mhm.
I mean, I personally, I think 2 on a 2.5 acre parcel is too many.
I just threw that
That's up to
2.5
me.
out there. You can make it for every additional 5 acres. One for additional each one for each additional 5 acres.
You guys are comfortable with 2 on a 2.5?
First 2.5, you can have 2. Anything additional over, and then after that, instead of do the 2.5, make it 5. I guess that's what we're saying.
Yeah, but are you guys still, you comfortable with 2 containers on a 2.5 acre parcel? That seems like a lot. I could see 1, and then for every 5 acres, you could do another one up to a limit of 6. 2.5 acres is not that big.
Well, I can see the
Yeah,
argument
yeah.
on the agricultural piece of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I really can.
Mm-hmm.
A
Yep.
2.5.
Yeah, because we're not making it exempt from that particular count, correct? Bonafide ag is not exempt from that count. They're exempt from everything else, but they're not exempt from the number of units per acre.
Right.
Well, a bona fide agricultural,
Is exempt.
you know, with an ag classification is not not restricted. But if you just have your ag zoning, then you're subject to the 2.5 and
2.5,
whatever
okay.
maximum count
All right.
and ratio you're determining. Because the statute will kick us out when we try to regulate that
Yeah, we
ag
can't
classified
regulate
property.
agriculture
Mm-mm.
exempt
No,
like that.
no.
I don't know.
Let's see the math. I mean, it's all I can say. It's like, let's see the write-up and
So-
hopefully we can,
What is the consensus? 2 for 2.5 and 1 more for so many acres, or he seems to go 1 for 2.5 and then add after 2.5 or
well, you
another
were,
5?
you were at 2 per parcel previously, so,
Stick with 2 for the 2.5.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 for 2.5, and if you want to make the additional 1 for every 5 acres. Over and
with a
above.
cap of, would still go
With
with
a
the cap.
cap of
yep.
6.
Mhm.
Okay.
Instead of the 2.5, 1 above, just make it 5. And I'm sure it may change before we get it through here.
Yeah,
After we look at it.
right, yeah, once we look at it on paper again, it may not make as much sense as spitballing it right now.
We're just giving you something to work with.
Yeah.
I understand.
You don't have anything else
That's
to do,
good.
right? There's nothing else going on.
You don't have anything else to do you, Scott?
Get it to council sometime.
I think you get the gist of where I'm coming
Yeah.
with the agriculture, though.
Okay.
And
Well, just, we'll kind of go back and clarify then. That's the ratio issue.
Yeah.
And then for the applicability, you want all zonings, ag and rural, to 2.5 acres are exempt from the regulations,
they're not exempt from the,
but not the cap.
but not the cap.
Yep.
Okay, but everything.
Unless they're got an agricultural exemption, then we can't.
Yeah, that'll solve itself.
Yeah.
That's we
And
don't even need to
because you
address
keep
that.
on
Right.
throwing- we keep on throwing bona fide ag out there, they're and that's only because we can't limit that.
Right, I understand.
That's
that.
called the
Bonafide
agricultural
ag,
exemption.
We have other structures, just because it's ag zoning doesn't mean it's automatic. That's want to be clear, from what I heard earlier, all the zoning class, residential classification we're proposing, which are agricultural and rural, and plus the RC, if they're 2.5 acres in size, they're exempt, they can have a shipping container exempt
larger.
from these regulations,
Mhm.
other than the cap ratio of so many per acre.
Mhm.
Correct. All right.
And then when this gets to council, they may
They'll be
want to
treated
see
like
that
any
everybody
other
should be
accessory
allowed to
structure
have
then.
Yeah.
a container. So, I mean,
Okay.
we're not the final say on this.
Oh, I understand, but
Yeah.
whatever I've drafted
give
for
you
you
guidance there,
will be
yeah.
your recommendation to them. So I want to be sure
Right.
I've captured all your thoughts and ideas on what we want
Yeah.
to do.
And if if someone's got something to justify making it less than 2.5, hopefully we would hear from them. Mr. Nagel says he's got it. Go ahead. I'd like to hear your question. Go ahead. I'd like to hear your question.
Is the PLDRC, the majority of the members here, are you recommending that you're not going to regulate shipping containers just because I've got ag zoning?
What?
But
No,
I don't- I
we're
got
gonna
ag-
regulate it, but we're gonna regulate it on size of the property,
Right.
and we're regulating on the maximum number that you can have,
But-
and the ratio thereof of starting at 2.5 acres.
The problem with that, though, is that the only people are really gonna, it's not gonna work well, because the only people that's gonna find out about those requirements that you just mentioned are the people that get complained about, and then they get told that, oh, you gotta go get a permit. And that's a minority of people. Most people who want shipping containers, they're not gonna naturally come and think that they got to apply for a permit.
Well, even
So-
if we were to put an ordinance in place that would put those restrictions on them, they would still do the same thing.
Yeah, but okay, I'll be quiet.
Okay, they would still do the same thing. And that's what's happening now. How many people come in and ask if they need a permit for shipping container? And how many do we have out there?
I'm pretty sure we don't issue permits for shipping containers.
But
It's
how
per-
many people
it's a-
ask?
it's
I'm
a-
not saying you do, but what if how many people ask?
Well, people have asked, and we told them they're not permitted, or certainly code compliance sees them, because they know, and they
Right.
cite people to bring it onto their property.
The point I'm trying to make is, I don't think that's going to change, whether the amount of people coming in and asking or not. And when they do, then they'll get informed, yes, you can have it, but you have to have at least 2.5 acres. And then go on and so forth like that, and the amount, how many they can have. You know, but I don't think it's going to change the fact that people coming in and asking if they got a permit or not, or need a permit.
Well, part of that was, to secure them to the ground, make sure, just like if it's going to be structured, because they can blow over. Video of Milton shows that they get knocked over just like anything else if it's strong enough wind. So we were wanting to secure them, but they'd be exempt from all that, other than the acreage. So there's no permit. I mean, if there's a violation, somebody has to just tell them, maybe take off one or two if you got too many. And it's just a checkup. So, the question about a permit, there won't be a permit based on if we go forward. If council adopts the language you were suggesting, if they're ag zoning 2.5 acres or greater, you're totally exempt, except for the ratio issue. From these special requirements, they may still apply to accessory structure standards already in the code, I would say. There are minimum standards for ag property under 72-277.
A shipping container, to me, you got to think about what we're dealing with. A shipping container, to me, it seems like a tractor trailer being part there would be more detrimental than a shipping container.
That's another
So
ordinance.
I mean, are we going to have a permit for a tractor trailer? Are we going to, at some point the means, the ways outweighs the means. In other words, I mean, you got to draw a line somewhere. I mean, a shipping container, that's the whole purpose of these things.
Yeah.
They're not a metal shed. They're not just going to get up and people can park a boat in their backyard. What stops that from flying away? That boat's going to fly away before the shipping container. A vehicle's going to fly away before that shipping container. It's sitting on the ground. It has no uplift. So
right.
It has no uplift.
Sorry, Miss Craig, you're not on record. Thank you.
You're seeing people talk about converting shipping containers to living spaces.
Well, this is exactly
That's a whole
what we were
different thing,
talking
yeah.
about.
Right.
I mean, obviously, that's got to go through the permitting process if it's
Yes.
inhabitable.
Yeah, if they use it as a material, we don't have an issue. We're just going to treat it like a
Mm-hmm.
normal dwelling
Yeah.
unit. Sure. Build whatever you want out of whatever. It would just come in for building
But
permit.
once again, aren't you introducing the possibility of having more after the fact permitting requests? If there's no regulation on the original.
What I'm trying to get into is and I think I've discussed this before. It's just like on our zoning, you have to have a permit for a chicken coop that's bigger than a 10 by 10. Now you can have a permit for a chicken coop, and I asked the code enforcement officer why that was, He said, well, if that way we know it's secure and it won't blow into the neighbor's yard. But my point was, yeah, I can park a sailboat behind my house too during a storm, and what stops that from blowing into someone's yard? You know, we don't want to get into that. And right now on our zoning, anything bigger than and I don't want to tangent off of this, but you have to have a permit for anything larger than 10 by 10 chicken coop.
Well, I will say we get a lot of code enforcement complaints of people converting structures that shouldn't have been converted into habitats. That is not a new thing. We deal with that. You deal with that. You know, you've got your barn dominiums that come before you, and someone converts a barn into an accessory dwelling unit. You've seen those variances if they can't meet the setbacks. So we have after the fact permits. You make them retrofit it. So that's not a new process, and we're not unfamiliar with that type of process. Significantly harder to do that with the shipping container, unless because it's kind of small. But that it does not prevent someone from saying, going through the process and actually using those shipping containers as material to construct a habitable structure. That's not prohibited by what we're doing here.
Right. So we're not, that wouldn't be allowed no matter what we do. Any other thing we want to add to this? Scott,
I'll
you got
reserve
more
for the next one.
questions?
I think we'll probably still need to look at a fair point from Paolo there, that you have the language in here. Some of this may not be applicable anymore by the permitting, but I would think certain things like not used for habitation, because that, again, the purpose was storage, and that's why you want to be exempt. It's storage, not a house. So I think some of this language would need to still apply. It's just maybe others doesn't, and that's what we'll have to work on and hopefully capture that. And we'll have good minutes so we can track all that information.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
So we need to make a motion or anything on this? Continue it or?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, let me hear a motion.
Make a motion that we continue, or case number case number O-24-005, 30 days, 60 days, what do you need?
How much do you need, Scott?
Do you think we can bring it back the 21st, or do we want the December?
Well,
No.
I don't
Trish
know
is
what-
telling me we probably want the December one because that's
yeah.
November's a large meeting.
December what?
No.
December 19th.
12/19, all right.
Yeah, you just continue.
So let me rephrase that. Motion on case O-24-005 to continue it to the December 19th PLDRC meeting.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to continue the O-24005 ordinance to their meeting in December the 19th, 2024 from Mr. Costa and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Let me get over here.
A few more things
That,
there.
it looks like it's it. And do we have any other public items?
No, sir.
Any staff items?
Yes, sir. Just to let you know, next month you will be looking at the comprehensive plan amendments and the zoning ordinance changes for the LID project. Hearing about LID?
Right.
Low impact development.
Yeah.
I know you like using acronyms.
Yes. We also will be having the 4 cases we didn't hear this month, plus our regular load that we have scheduled for next month. So,
Okay.
Just wanna
On
prepare you
that on that note, on that note, sharpen yourself up on these LID, what LID actually is, what it does, what the purpose of it is, and what the overall impact it will have, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. People have different ideas, and we may have some different ones too than what comes forward through the LID. And I think a lot of this LID is coming from NREC, is it not?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
NREC's been working
So
at it.
that's their recommendations. And they've spent a lot of time on this, and what we need to do is, that's why I would like for you to really dwell into it and see what's coming forward. Okay? Any other staff items?
No, sir.
Staff comments?
No, sir.
Commission comments?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Costa.
I would like to formally make a request that anytime we have ordinances and comprehensive plan changes that are basically in-house items, that we keep it to the bottom of the list, not at the beginning of the meetings, so that we can get the general population in and out as quickly as possible, so that we could spend our time discussing it without holding them up for the day.
We can do that. I mean, that's something can be done at the time, and if it inadvertently gets put forward. The reason that was before up beginning with is because it was old business, and we usually take care of that first.
Well, in the first pass, it was also one of the top items on our agenda, as I was late that day. That's why I asked for it to be moved.
The reason we do that, just to let you know, is we try to give a courtesy to our employees who are trying to do 100 things during the day, so we bring them in first so that they can get it done and get back to work, but we can certainly put it at the end as well.
Mm-hmm. And as far as being able to bring the packets to us, we need to notify staff in the event that you can't access your property. They can't get to me now unless they come in with a canoe. And so
I'll make sure the paddle's ready next month.
We are looking at different ways of doing this in the future. Kelly has the production down pretty well, and we believe we'll be able to mail everything out 7 days in advance, which is the way we used to do it.
Yeah.
So that may be coming your way in the future. You may not get a hand delivery in the future.
Okay. And
I like it hand delivered. It's the only time I get to say hello and just kind of hang out.
Kelly wants to see my cows. Come on.
Yeah. And a lot of things that come, while we're on that discussion, a lot of things come across this board that we have to make decisions on and recommendations on as to how it impacts the neighboring communities. And so we need to keep an eye on this. I don't think it's as much impact as what some of the cities are doing, but we need to have more of a communication with the cities so that we don't end up in situations like some of the ones we're having now. And I'll leave it at that. But we just need to be thinking about it because there are a lot of people impacted. We had a lot of rain. I get that. But a lot of these problems existed before Milton, and we need to. That Milton just magnified these problems. So keep that in mind as we move forward as far as recommendations and that we need to. I think we need to work closer with the cities and make sure that we're not affecting the adjacent property owners as much as being done by the cities.
Just so that you all know, for every project that's a rezoning or a comp plan amendment or a special exception, if we are near a city, the application goes out to the city planning department and to the utilities department for comments.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about the county. I'm talking about the city reaching out to us and getting our comments and our input. I don't see that much in the county, but I do see quite a bit in the city. So we need to keep that in mind. See if we can get some communication going on there and some understanding of how it impacts the adjacent county property owners. Because if we live in the county, we don't necessarily have representation on the city commission to the city as far as we don't have any representative there. Go ahead.
Just to let you all know about an upcoming project that we're working on that we'll be bringing to the county council in March. We're working on a rural, you probably have heard this in the news and in the last county council meeting, but we're looking at the rural areas and coordinating with the cities about annexations and what urban uses and rural uses. So you'll be seeing a part of that is that we're going out to all the cities and to VCARD and to the environmental coalition. So you will see a lot of outreach in the next series of months.
Well, appreciate that. Okay. Any other commission comments?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could talk about storage containers before we leave.
Go ahead.
No, I'm pulling your leg. I don't want to.
Go ahead. I don't know if you're going to have a quorum, but go ahead. Okay, any other commission comments? Any press and citizen comments? This meeting's adjourned.